Okay, so we're going to go over solving quadratic equations. By now you guys have learned at least two different ways to do it. One way is to go from this form here, which is the standard form. And from standard form, we can turn it into factored form. Okay, which is exactly what we have over here. Standard, two-factored form. What process would we use for that? Factoring. We would use factoring to go to factored form. Factoring. Then, another option to solve something is to go, where is it? Vertex form. There it is. Go from standard form to vertex form. Yes. And when doing that,
that's what we did yesterday, right?
Yeah. The process we would use is completing the square. Completing the square, TS, okay? And finally, another way we can do this is just to use the quadratic formula, which is this formula down here, okay? This quadratic formula will solve any quadratic for you, assuming it's set equal to 0. It will solve the variables in the equation. It will always work. So even when we can't factor something, we can use the quadratic formula to solve it. Now, normally, factoring is much faster than using the quadratic formula. Okay, but we'll go through it today and you'll see. If you get good at factoring, it's a much faster version to do it. But if you cannot factor something, the quadratic formula will always work. So what we're going to go over is we're going to quickly factor this. Then we're going to do it through vertex form. And finally, we'll use the quadratic formula to show you using the same equation. We can solve it 3 different ways. So, since you guys are amazing at factoring, what is the first step to factoring? Greatest common factor, okay? So, what I'm going to do here, the greatest common factor is our -5. So, we're going to pull -5 out of each of the terms. So, 0 is equal to, the 0 is just over here. -5 outside of the brackets, t squared minus 2t minus 3. Now we're just going to focus on the brackets themselves. We're going to factor what's inside of the brackets. The first term, factors of the first term are 1t, 1t. Factors of the last term are 3 and 1. And we know they need to add up to -2. Obviously we're multiplying them across, so we get 3t and 1t, which will have to be negative. The 3. 3 needs to be negative. So that means this term here has to be negative. When we go to put it back into factored form, our a is -5. T will be the first term in each, and -3 and +1 are the second terms. Now, this -5 here, I want to set each of these brackets equal to 0, okay? This -5 can just drop off. One of the processes we can use is dividing each side by -5, which would create a 1 here, and over here we'd still be left with a 0, okay? So I'm going to just jump to the next step. We've gone over that before. We're going to split the equation. 0 is equal to t minus 3, and 0 is equal to t plus 1. Our values of t are 3 and -1. Go.
Okay, today is April 18th.
What are we about to do? We're in standard form. We're going to go into...
Factored form.
Nope.
Vertex.
Vertex form, yes.
Yeah.
Now what?
You have to divide everything by -5. -5 outside of that. Oh, just the first two.
Just the first two. So we're going to take a, which is our -5, out of the first two terms.
Yeah.
Why do you do only the first two?
Because we're creating the x value of our vertex form, and we only need a bracket around the first two. Our last value stays outside of the bracket. Okay? So 0 is equal to what, Jaden?
-5 brackets t squared minus 2 brackets plus 15.
Okay. Good.
And then so you divide -2 by -2 and by 2, and then you square.
So we use this little formula here for creating a perfect square. B divided by 2 squared.
Yeah.
What is B, Jaden?
-2.
Okay. -2 divided by 2 is?
-1.
And -1 squared?
1.
Good. And what do we do with that 1? We
Add it and subtract.
add and subtract that in the bracket. So what's the next bracket going to read?
0 equals -5 bracket t squared minus 2 plus 1 divided by
Minus 2t plus 1 subtract 1.
Plus 15.
Close brackets.
Yeah,
15.
good. What's the next step?
You multiply -1 by -5.
Why? Because we're taking it outside the brackets. That's right. So because of distributive property, we multiply by this a term here.
I remember this.
So what's the next step going to be?
0 equals -5 brackets t squared minus 2t plus 1 brackets -5.
Is it -5?
Negative. Oh wait, negative. No, positive.
Yeah, positive because it's a negative times a negative. And then plus 15. Now next, what?
I would just add the ones outside the bracket.
Okay, let's add what's outside of the bracket, solve what our k value is. So what's our k value going to be? Positive 20. And what do I do with the brackets themselves?
Factor inside the bracket.
Okay, what's the fast way to factor this? Fast way to factor is square root the first and last term. Okay? So we get 0 is equal to -5. And we're just going to condense it into one bracket squared. What is the square root of t squared?
T.
Good. And square root of 1?
Plus 1.
Yeah. Well, it's technically plus or minus, but we're just going to use the absolute value 1. Okay? So, t is the first term, 1 is the other term. What operation do I put between them, Benedict? Yes, because there's a negative sign in front of this 2, we bring the negative down. So it's t minus 1 squared plus 20.
At the beginning of the equation, -5 divided.
So, we still have to solve for t. Now, obviously, this is a longer version because we went into vertex form first. But the reason we're now able to solve, and it was too difficult before, is because we had 2 variable t and they had different exponents. Now I'm left with just 1 variable t. Okay? That way I can solve this question now. There's only 1 variable. We know how to solve for 1 variable. We just need to isolate that variable. So we would use reverse bedmass. So that positive 20 goes to the other side. It becomes -20 over there. All right? We get -20 is equal to -5t minus 1 squared. Next, I move the -5 over. In order to do that, I have to divide both sides by -5.
Why? You can't just move it over.
That is just moving it over. The reason I divide is because, why? Anyone know?
Because you get all the brackets.
What's the operation between -5 and those brackets?
It's time.
It's multiplication. So because it's multiplication, in order to move it,
Yes, it's 5.
I use division. -20 divide -5.
-5. -4.
4.
Or 4.
Positive 4. On this side, we're left with t minus 1 squared. Now, here's the tricky part. In order to get rid of the squared, that's right, Shane, we square root both sides. Now, I would like to see who gets the answer here.
2 equals.
T minus 1? Is that it?
Yeah.
Why not? Hold on. Is this the right step?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
What's the square root of 4?
2.
Just 2?
2.
Yes.
2 times 2 is 4.
So just positive 2.
Yes.
2t.
Ah, there are 2 answers to square root of 4.
Oh, plus or minus.
Plus or minus 2. Now, this is very important, and we're going to refer back to the other page. Remember on the other page here, actually, I should bring it up as double. Can I do that? Sorry, give me one second. There we go. Remember on this page here, where we split this, and we got 2 different answers? We're going to have to do the same thing here because there are 2 technically answers to square rooting 4. There are 2 answers to square root 4, so we have plus and minus 2. So we're going to actually have to split it here to find out the 2 values of t.
Like you do in the quadratic formula.
Yeah, just like you'll do in the quadratic formula next. So now what we're left with is this splits into 2 equations. One answer is positive 2, one answer is negative 2. So we have 2 is equal to and negative 2 is equal to the rest of the equation, which is t minus 1 and t minus 1. So when I bring that 1 over, what does this become? T is equal to 3, which we got on the other page, right? Remember with t was equal to 3. And on this side, what does it become? -1, which was our other answer on that page. So using vertex form, we can solve the exact same thing as long as we've set it equal to 0. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do the exact same formula, and we're going to use another style to solve it. Plus 10t plus 15 is equal to 0. Okay. So we use factoring. Now, This quadratic formula, this is the formula we're going to use down here. And what it essentially says is x, which in this case our x are our t's, okay? So it's saying that that is going to be equal to this formula, and we plug everything in. We need to be in standard form to use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to bring it over here. Didn't quite work. Try that again.
How do you do that?
There we go. So here's our quadratic formula. And in standard form, our a value is -5, our b value is 10, and our c value is 15. So c, 15 is going to replace that c right there. There are two versions of b. This is -b, and this is b, and there are two a's in this. We're going to replace all of those with our standard forms a, b, and c. Now, you could solve any quadratic equation in standard form using this method. Now, factoring, remember when we said we were unable to factor? That was just because we never really went into factoring with decimals or fractions. It becomes very complex when you do that. It's really not worth your time. So if you can't factor it into whole numbers, your best step is to come to this, the quadratic formula. This will be the next fastest way in order to solve one of the questions. So we're going to plug these in. We're going to also replace x with what variable? T, that's right, because we're solving for t. So t is equal to negative plus 10. Right? Because 10 is, our b value is positive 10. And then it says plus or minus. Why does it say plus or minus? Why is there going to be two different answers? Because we have a square root, right? And remember, a square root has two answers. We just talked about that on the other page. And then we're going to have positive 10 again, squared, minus 4 times our a value is -5. And our c value is positive 15. Make sure we get our operations in front of those correctly. And then 2 times -5. Okay. So, when we go to solve this, what is negative plus 10? How can I simplify that sign?
Negative.
Yeah, it's just going to be -10 plus or minus. I just got to make the square root again. What is 10 squared going to be?
100.
That's right, 100. Now, I want you to think of like this. This is, you could say -4. -4 times -5. It's going to be positive 20. And what's positive 20 times 15 going to be?
460.
300. Good.
-4 times
That's the same.
You could do -4 times 15, then times -5, and you would have got the exact same answer. Okay? And then 2 times -5. Good. So we go to simplify what's under the square root. We have -10 plus or minus the root of 400. And everything is divided by -10 again. -10 plus or minus. So they already told us we're going to have a plus or minus. What's the square root of 400? 20. Divided by -10. And this is why we separate it. Just like we did in the last two, we have two answers for a square root, a plus and a minus answer. So we get our two answers here. We're going to get is equal to -10, and I'm going to put this in red just so you guys can see, plus 20, and the other one will be subtracting 20. Okay, that's what the difference between the two of them would be, divided by -10, and then this one is -10 minus 20 divided by -10. So we're going to get -10 plus 20 divided by -10, -10 minus 20, -30 divided by -10, plus 3. So, which is exactly what we found in the other two answers. So there are 3 different ways you could have solved this. This one is comparing, I'm just going to pin this. So this is our, that's our, what did I just say, quadratic formula. The next one we bring up, there we go, is comparing between quadratic formula and vertex form. And in the next one we bring up, solve it one second. Computer's going a bit slow. That would be compared to factoring and quadratic formula. So I just want you to bring your attention to this. The factoring, if you notice, is pretty quick. Okay? If you can factor it, factor it. If not, you're going to use quadratic formula.